Okay, the other thing that happens a lot of times, we have what we call the risers. And here is a cut-off riser. This goes down in a T or an elbow like this, and then you could cut it like I told you along there, and then put your sprinkler right on there. Okay? Well, then there's a flex one, and then they make them out of PVC. This is a big one, but they make them different sizes, so you can buy whatever you need. And they're in, usually the risers are F-inch, okay? So then, again, readjustment, you want to raise your sprinklers, you got to take this out, you got to, and a lot of times when you take it out of the ground, dirt falls into the T down in the ground. So they came out with what we call the swing joint. We love swing joints because these joints turn. So you could put it down in here and then turn this down and this up, and then have your sprinkler on top. This is down, and you got it up like that, and your sprinkler's on like this. And so for the right height, all you have to do is crank this down a little bit or up. And so it's great to adjust your sprinkler. So usually when we do a repair, we use them, or when we do an installation, we like to use them right off the bat. But a lot of time, if you're bidding on a job, it's a lot cheaper to use these. And if you've got 20 sprinklers going in or more, that can mean a lot of money on your bid. So a lot of time you got to do a lot of explaining to the client why your bid's higher than someone else's. So make sure you do that. When you're making your bid, explain why you're charging as much as you are for the convenience of all these different things. So anyway, the other thing that comes to mind is when you do break off one of these down in here, when they break, if people bang them around like that, they break off right here. And you got about 2 or 3 threads. Part of this part that's down inside breaks off right there, and it's stuck in there. Now you can't put a new one in. So that's when they came out with a beautiful little tool. It's called an Easy Out. And you poke it down in there, push it in nice and hard, and it's got these ears, and you could just keep pushing and turning, and it comes right out. So we got one of these in each one of our trucks. This is very important to have, okay? So, you know, if you're gonna be doing, and again, you don't need glue or anything, you're gonna do repair, a lot of times, these 2 things, and maybe a hacksaw or a hacksaw blade comes in handy. Because you don't cut this with anything except maybe a cutter. Like this is a PVC cutter, and it's ratcheted, and you just crank on it. It's ratcheted, so you just take your time. And you can see it does a nice smooth cut. Now, I'm not going to cut one, but if you cut one with your hacksaw, you don't have your cutter, you're going to have a lot of little burrs on here. So you should take your knife and run it on the inside and on the outside to get rid of the burrs. This is when you do a glue job, because if you don't get rid of the burrs, when you put it together, they go through the water and then they plug up the nozzles in your sprinkler. So the main thing, a lot of times, instead of carrying a big hacksaw like this, we carry a little tiny blade and no handle. Just wrap a rag around it and you cut. This stuff cuts real easy. But if you do a lot, think you may do a lot of work, you buy a pair of these, you got this, you got your hacksaw blade, and a couple of these, and you're in business, you know. Because the reason I'm telling you to do all this, and you think, well, that's a lot of bother. But if you break a piece of a nipple or something off, and you have to leave the job, go to the hardware store, pick up some parts, and then come back, you're blown an hour. So whatever your hourly rate is, that's out the window. You know, you broke the pipe, you're not charging the client for it. You gotta fix it, okay? So this is why, also, why I like this one. If there's a sprinkler on top, and somebody's, when you mow the lawn, you step on it, it just pushes it down. But when you have the rigid one like this, you're putting a lot of pressure on that fitting down there, and you could break it there. And a lot of time, the sprinkler doesn't work, so you want to know what's wrong. You take the nozzle out and see if it's dirty. If it's clean, then you got a break down here, and it doesn't show on the surface. Because this may break right here, and the water just squirting out down that far, so you won't find it. So I always think of sprinkler repair as detective work. You have to figure out where it's leaking. You know, no water comes out of your sprinklers, well, you got a problem. So you go to the valve and you listen. If the water is running, you know it's running somewhere out in the garden. So you walk around first and see if you see puddles after about 10, 15 minutes. And then you start localizing and seeing if you could get down to where it did break, okay? Because a lot of times if it breaks, the sprinkler nearest the valve, that's where all the water's coming out, and that's why no more water's coming out down the line. But a lot of times, if your last one, or one toward the end, only doesn't work, you know, you have to figure all that out. So it's kind of a fun thing, but I caution you, or not caution you, tell you where to go. I always recommend Urban Farmer, and they're out on, I think 40th and Vicente, and they're very helpful, and they have all this stuff, and explain to them what your problems are. And also, they have seminars at night, certain times of the year, that they're free after 6 o'clock or something like that. So you can contact them and find out when they're having these seminars and what they're teaching on a given night. And you could go with sprinkler installation, sprinkler troubleshooting, whatever. And also, I always recommend, if you're going to be in this field, take Malcolm's class on irrigation on top of all of it. You should never know it all. There's always something new happening, okay? If there's any questions, you can ask Thomas, and he can answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gus.